All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the August 2nd, 2018 Murray City Planning Commission. My name is Travis Ney. Up on the dais here, we have Sue Wilson, Maren Patterson, Phil Markham, Lisa Milkevich, and Ned Hacker. From staff this evening, it looks like we have Jared Hall, Jim McNulty, Zachary Smallwood, and then from the legal department, Brian Farnsworth is here. We have a light agenda until the last item, I believe, so we'll try to power through some of our early information here first. I will ask, just as general rules, if you have cellular phones on, I ask that you please mute your phone. If you need to take a phone call, we ask that you take it out in the other room. If you are here to speak to an item this evening, when we open the public comment, everyone is allowed to come up and speak for 3 minutes. We ask that you limit the information to new information, so we don't want to hear the same information over and over again. We're trying to build a good legal record here, and we need as much information as you can possibly give us. That said, let's move into the formal agenda. Item number 1 on the agenda this evening is the approval of the minutes from January 19th. Has everybody had an opportunity to review those?
Yes.
All right. Other than the minor text changes that we had in the pre-meeting, any other additional corrections?
No.
Okay, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from the July 19th Planning Commission meeting.
I have a motion by Mr. Hacker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Wilson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Item number 2 is conflict of interest. Does anybody have a conflict of interest with any of the agenda items this evening?
No.
Okay, no. Item number 3 is approval of the finding of fact from the July 19, 2018 meeting. We have a conditional use for master scraper for a wood scraping business at the property address 4195 South, 500 West, unit number 2. Has everybody had an opportunity to review that?
Yes.
Any additions, corrections?
No.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the finding of fact for Master Scraper located at 4195 South, 500 West, unit number 2.
I have a motion by Mr. Markham. Do I have a second?
I'd like to second that.
Second by Ms. Milkevich. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. Item number 4 this evening is Ice House, and they are seeking a certificate of appropriateness for a major alteration for the expansion of an outdoor patio area at the property address 7 East, 4800 South. Is the applicant here this evening? Don't see him. Okay. Well, Mr. Hall.
Thank you. This is an application, as you mentioned, for a certificate of appropriateness. Ice House is a bar and grill located 7 East 4800 South in the MCCD zone. As the Commission is aware, the MCCD zone requires special approval for any changes to any building, building facade or exterior changes. Ice House a couple of years ago came to the Planning Commission for a certificate of appropriateness to expand the building footprint and put a patio out front. It's a little different because the building is far set back, and in the MCCD zone they're supposed to be out near the street, so the expansion was a little different. At that time we did not take them to the hearing officer. This time around we did recognize that we should have gotten an approval for the expansion of a non-conforming structure. So we did take them to the hearing officer, and then they went to the MCCD Design Review Committee and received approval to expand that patio. The patio that they did, outdoor patio, a couple of years ago was very successful. They wanted to expand that footprint and have some more outdoor dining space. It is, like we said, in the MCCD zone on the north side of 4800 South there. The patio expansion, I'll just show you this quickly. The original patio that was put in was right here. They want to double the size of that and expand out to this direction. It does eliminate the use of 3 stalls that they had before, 3 parking stalls. They'll replace those parking stalls with bicycle racks, bicycle parking out in front there. There's 12 altogether. That's something that's encouraged by the MCCD zone. The patio there, this is just a visual to show you again. That's the existing patio and the trellis cover. It'll extend out, doubling that size. We have gone through that, as I said, with the DRC. They recommended approval to the Planning Commission for that certificate of appropriateness. No changes to the landscaping. The only change to the parking would be the reduction of those 3. There's not a lot of parking there, but in the MCCD zone, the parking requirements are very, very low, and they are over the requirement by just a little bit, even with the loss of those 3 stalls. They are looking, though, recognizing that parking is limited. They're trying to lease some parking spaces from the fee lot that's up on the corner of Hanauer and 4800 South for their employees in the evening. Working that out. We didn't require it, however, as a condition of approval because it isn't. They do meet the requirements for the parking. Just a picture of the existing patio that they did install already. The railing around it. Now, all those same features will be included in the new expansion. It's just going to look exactly like it, minus the yellow canvas sale. They're looking at some kind of hard cover in the future.
They're not
So-
prohibited from having that.
Not
though,
prohibited
correct?
from having. They just want something. A
I
little
noticed the
nicer.
design review committee said something about it as well, so I just want to
They're
clarify.
looking at other options to provide a little more shade when it's really hot. Get a lot of use out of it. The staff is recommending approval as well as the DRC, and our recommended conditions of approval are just that they get the right building permits. The building inspectors want to make sure they get good permits for the electrical that's required for this and those exits and things. It's required that outdoor area is required to have the same kind of exiting that any room would have. Panic hardware on the little gates that let you out of the railings, etc. So that'll be fun. And that's just that they get the right kinds of information to us for those things, and that they meet all the requirements of the MCCD zone that they can as we look at that patio expansion. Any questions for staff at this point?
Jared, have there been any comments by the police department about noise or, rowdiness or anything like that?
We haven't had any comments from the police department about problems as a result of the ice house. It's a fairly well-run bar. Good food, a lot of business during the daytime and the evenings.
Thanks.
All right. And again, the applicant is not here this evening. Okay, there you go. So at this point in time, we will open this up for public comment. If anyone from the public would like to speak to this issue, we ask that you come up, state your name and address for the record. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Frank Diana. I am the property owner of Club 48. So I own the property just west of the ice house. I'm not here to say that I don't want this to happen. We do want this to happen, but we want to make sure that you understand that we do not share parking with these folks, and to make sure that they go ahead and they do seek that additional parking for their customers.
Okay.
And that's, we're all for it. We think it's good for the neighborhood. We think it's good for business, but the parking in that particular location has always been a problem.
Do you get a lot of spillover into your property?
We do.
Okay.
We do. And we're just as busy, and we don't want this conflict or, they park a lot of cars on Box Elder Street, and the police were there 2 Fridays ago, and they weren't our customers. They were the ice house customers. Here again, if they have parking, all of that goes away. All of that problem goes away. And since Murray City has taken Frankie and Johnny's, which is across the street, you guys have taken that property and cabled it off, taken that parking lot and cabled it off, which limits that parking. And so now they're parking on the street, which is spilling over onto Box Elder Street, causing a bit of a problem. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public like to speak to this? Seeing no additional people to comment, we'll bring it back here we'll close the public comment and bring it back here for discussion. Motion?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that we approve the certificate of appropriateness for a major alteration allowing the expansion of the outdoor patio and dining area on the property address 7th East, 4800 South, subject to the 3 conditions.
All right, I have a motion by Mrs. Patterson to approve a certificate of appropriateness for a major alteration allowing for the expansion of an outdoor patio and dining area for the property address 7 East, 4800 South, subject to conditions 1 through 3. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Mr. Markham. Call for a vote, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, motion carries. All right, item number 6 on the agenda, item number 5 on the agenda this evening is Susan Hogan seeking a conditional use for an accessory dwelling unit at the property address 17 East, 6150 South. Is the applicant here this evening? We'll have you up in just a moment.
Great.
Mr. Smallwood.
Hello, everyone. So Ms. Hogan is looking to open a accessory dwelling unit on her property. She owns a little over a half acre, about 0.65 acres of land. She would like to use her existing garage and close that off and make that an accessory dwelling unit. It's currently in the R18 zone, which allows for accessory dwelling units. It's right off State Street, really close to the Heritage Center. Here I have the layout. So the house is on the left, and then just a little bit behind it is where the proposed accessory dwelling unit would be. In addition to that, they are going to be putting in a new carport that will provide the parking for that accessory dwelling unit. And then here you have the floor plan, and then just quick elevations. Then I have pictures that actually show it a little bit better. And that is pretty much it. So we are recommending approval for this item, subject to these 6 conditions. Any questions for staff?
In the pre-meeting, we mentioned a concern, just basically an uneducated concern on our part, because we're not up on the building code as specifically as the city building inspector is, but the bedrooms seem to have a very small size. And so that is still subject to approval when a building permit is taken out. There is a chance that this may not be suitable for a dwelling unit if that bedroom can't be enlarged. Is that correct?
It is subject to current building code, and that would be addressed with the applicant during that process.
Okay.
I'm not privy to exactly what the size of a bedroom should be.
It just seems small to all
but
of
yeah,
us,
definitely
I know.
it is addressed, and I believe it is condition number 2 specifically states that they need to obtain a building permit.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
And they're well underneath the size limit for this. They
Very
could,
much so.
Yeah, so they could
Yeah.
expand it.
I
make
think
it larger
they're
if they
in
needed to.
like with the house, they're like 25% of the area. The proposed unit, it's 472 acres. Or wow, square feet. Yeah,
It's a really big building.
really small. 472 acres. 472 square feet.
Any additional questions? No? All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
If we could have the applicant come up and just state your name and address for the record, please. Good evening.
Good evening, Suzanne Hogan. My address is 17 East, 6150 South.
Have you had an opportunity to review the 6 conditions?
We have.
And you'll be able to comply with those 6 conditions?
We will.
Do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Jim, do you want to say anything? Okay, good. He's a contractor, so I'm like,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, at this point in time, we will open this up for public comment. If anyone would like to speak to this issue, come on up, state your name and address. And seeing none, we will close the public comment and bring it back here for discussion and or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the Planning Commission approve conditional use permit to allow the accessory dwelling unit at the property address 17 East, 6150 South.
I have a motion by Mr. Hacker to approve the conditional use permit to allow an accessory dwelling unit at the property address 17 East, 6150 South, subject to conditions 1 through 6. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Mrs. Wilson. Call for a vote, please.
Yes.
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 Yes, motion carries. Good luck.
Yes. Good luck with that.
All right. We will be hearing items number 6 and 7 as a joint presentation this evening, but I'll go ahead and read them into the formal agenda. Item number 6 is Applegate HOA seeking a general plan amendment from low-density residential to medium-density residential at the property address 770 West Applegate Way. And item number 7 is Applegate HOA seeking a zoning map amendment from R18 to RM15 at the property address 770 West Applegate Way. Mr. Smallwood.
Thank you very much. Great. So the current property, it's 23 and a half acres. It's currently zoned R18, as you can see here, which when it was developed in the early 1970s was an R2A zone, which allowed for this type of development in it. And as time progressed, it got rolled into an R18 zone just through updates and things like that. The current general plan calls for it to be R18, and as you guys went through the general plan update, we had decided that instead of forcing these updates on the other owners, we would just take them as a case-by-case basis. And so this homeowners association has a majority voted to come before us to update this to RM15, which is what they're proposing. and staff has not received any additional application or information provided to us. So we don't have any information on anything that may happen after a rezone. This is just to update the general plan and then subsequently update the zoning, which is required to do those items. So here staff recommends that you do forward a positive recommendation to the general plan or to the city council to update the general plan. And again, we do recommend forwarding a recommendation of approval for the zoning map amendment as well. Any questions for me?
Can you go back to the zoning map, please? So there's obviously a number of denser areas around here, right? There's apartment units outside of this property.
That is correct. Yes. Yep. To the northeast a little bit.
And then directly north is the church. Is that?
Yes.
What we see? Okay. And then regular R18 housing,
Yep.
single
To the
detached
west.
housing to the west. Okay. Thank you. All right. Any questions for Mr. Smallwood?
I mean, I guess maybe this isn't a question. We've kind of talked about this in the pre-meeting a little bit. The way that it's currently zoned R18, if this area was to get redeveloped, it would either have to go through this process, right? Or be developed as single family homes because of how it's currently designated on the general plan.
That's correct. If for some reason they decided that they wanted to subdivide currently in the R18 zone, it would have to be developed as single family homes.
Right. So, I mean, I guess maybe just explain, I know we have a lot of people here.
Yes.
Like it's confusing this process of what it's currently designated as.
Yeah.
And what that means for any kind of redevelopment, like the steps of what we're going through this process.
No, for sure. And so it would take, it is quite a lengthy process. This is the beginning, the very beginning of a process. If they decide to redevelop or develop any portion of this property, this is not even a foot in the door. This is just approaching the door. This property is non-conforming currently, which could potentially impact refinancing efforts by the condo owners. It could also impact, mostly financing is what I kind of get from it. And really all you can do is stick within what is currently there. Nothing more could happen there. So bringing that into conformance would allow them to possibly pursue redevelopment or expansion or whatever they have. But again, that's not before us tonight.
Right, that's not the purpose of this.
Yeah.
And we talked about this in the pre-meeting. One thing that's about changing this zoning and the general plan is that it would bring something that's not conforming in, like we're getting it that it's matching what its actual use is rather than it being a non-conforming purpose in this zone.
Precisely.
Right.
Yep, that's exactly what this is. It's already developed closely to an RM15 standard.
Right.
So bringing it into compliance would it cleans up some of the mapping here in the city.
It's a step in the right direction, but it doesn't solve all the issues because they would still be non-conforming even in the current zone that is designated for this area, correct?
That is correct.
Because of egress and
there are
numerous other things.
Yeah, there are substantial issues that would need to be addressed if they were to pursue anything further.
Any type of activity on the property.
Any type of activity.
And it's going to come, I mean, if something else were to come forward, it would come before the Planning Commission multiple times.
Yes.
It would go before the City Council multiple times.
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that the people are aware that before anything were to happen redevelopment-wise, this would go through a whole nother level of processes. All this rezone does is say that the land that your homes are sitting on is zoned correctly. That's all we're doing tonight, is we're just correcting the zoning to what it should have been. This was zoned in 1973, and things were a lot different then than they are now. And just for example, if one of these units were to burn down and you wanted to rebuild, you wouldn't be able to because you have to have a single-family home according to the current zone. And of course, you know that's not what you're wanting to do at all. So we're not trying to push a development on anyone or any of those things. That's putting the cart in front of the horse. All we're trying to do is rezone this so that it matches your homes that are already on the land. So you have a condo, we just want to zone it so that it's for a condo. So that if something were to happen, you wouldn't have any problem with your financing and all those other things that have been mentioned in pre-meeting and up here. So, we're not trying to push a redevelopment. We're just trying to clean up paperwork.
Your mic's off.
It is not.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was off. Thank you, Commissioner Wilson, for bringing that point up. And that's one of our concerns in this area. If a building were to catch fire and burn down, we couldn't issue a permit to rebuild it. And we've had other condominium projects. Three Fountains is one that last year some buildings caught fire and they've had to be rebuilt. And we were able to rebuild those. They were able to rebuild those because the zoning allows for condominiums and multifamily. The R18 zone that this is currently zoned doesn't allow for this type of development. So currently it's non-conforming to the zone. And then the general plan land use map, the designation of RM15, puts it in compliance with the general plan land use map. So this is more of a cleanup. If there are things going on in the community with the HOA and potentially a group or a development type group, that's the next stage. This is process number one. There'll be other processes, other public hearings, other chances to comment on future plans that may or may not happen for the area. And we're not reviewing those tonight. It's just a lot of speculation at this point. So this is step one. If step two comes, it'll be somewhere down the line. And this is where we're at right now.
And everyone would receive notification of that as well. It would be very much a public process.
Yes, that's correct.
Any additional questions for Mr. Smallwood? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a representative of the HOA here that is speaking to this issue this evening? Good evening. Just have you state your name and address for the record, please.
George Cowen, 3356 El Cerrito Drive.
Okay.
I own property in Applegate.
Okay. Do you have anything that you would like to add in all of this?
Yeah, so what we did is we took a vote within the HOA. 85% of the people voted. Okay, not 100%. Out of that 85% that voted, 85% wanted to move forward in this direction, 15% did not.
Okay.
So we wanted to let you know what the numbers were coming from us.
Okay. And of that 85%, what did you have a majority to be able to vote on and have it be a quorum?
I'm trying to remember what it was. What was it? Two-thirds.
Two-thirds. Okay. So you exceeded your two-third vote.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else that you'd like to add?
Quick question: that the 85% of the people that were in attendance and voting, were they owners? Were they tenants? Who has a
Owners.
vote?
Owners are the ones
owners.
that can vote.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, it's a good question.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? No. Okay. I think there's a number of people that would like to speak to this. So at this point in time, we'll open up the public comment. We just ask that you, again, state your name and address for the record. Please limit your time to 3 minutes. And then we also ask that you continue to present new information to us.
Good evening. My name's Calvin Noyce. I live at 5219 Gravenstein Park, which is part of the Applegate HOA. I've been an owner there for, tomorrow will be a year. So I'm a relative newcomer. But I was around for the voting that the previous gentleman mentioned. And as far as I know, those figures are correct. And I am for this taking place. We've had several meetings talking about what could happen to the property if it was rezoned to be in compliance, down the road. I think probably not everybody. I've been involved in HOAs for 33 years, so I may have a little better understanding than somebody who hasn't. But in any case, I think a lot of the people understand what we're doing here tonight, and that it is, in fact, the first step, as you mentioned, Mr. Ney. And so, yeah, we're probably looking at doing something down the road as time progresses. So this is the first step, and
I, for one, am for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Craig. I live at 5365 South Baldwin Park in Applegate. I'm not for this, but is there any way that they could show proof of this 85%? I've asked and asked and asked, and to me, it's just a ghost because I've talked to many people that are not for this. So I would like to see the proof of the 85%.
Okay, we're not presented with that information, unfortunately, so we have to take it at the word of the HOA, but your comments
is
are...
there a way to, because so many people have moved since then, and there was never been a problem of buying or selling them, so I don't see where this 85% is coming from.
I don't think that number is binding on our action tonight, however. This is an application presented by a party, and we are to decide what we want to do with the application. So even I think if it had been turned down by the members of the HOA and the HOA itself wanted to still present this, it would be considered by us.
Okay.
I believe.
But,
all right, thank you.
Mr. Markham, that's an interesting question that Mr. Gregg brings up, because we are assuming that HOAs have a written policy or procedure, and percentages or role is kept. And can a group come to Murray City and say, I represent so-and-so, and not present proof of that? Or do we ask for some kind of, how do we know the HOA is truly represented?
We're not a party to the HOA. The HOA is a private entity. We have to take what they're telling us face value. It's really a civil matter between the owner and the HOA that they pay fees or dues to. So whatever they need to do to get that information from the HOA if it's not being provided to them. Or maybe after tonight, they can set up a time where they can meet and be civil about this and figure it out. So that's what we'd recommend.
I'm sorry we don't have more to offer you on that.
No, I would just like proof, because I mean, we could just have the wrong board and the wrong management company, and they could walk right over us.
Yeah.
So,
And then, Mr. Hall and Mr. McNulty, the second part of that was someone that comes to you is either the president or the secretary or the chair of the HOA. Is that correct?
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Anders. I live at 5335 Majestic Village Circle in Murray. I'm opposed to the rezoning effort, not because it represents some sort of minor housekeeping move, but it represents the camel's nose under the tent in regard to what could be a very adverse condition developing on that property in our neighborhood. It represents an opening of the door to what could be a development that would profoundly affect the quality of life in our neighborhood. And I and many of my neighbors are adamantly opposed to the first step, because the first step, as far as we're concerned, is over a cliff. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden.
Thank you, Mr. Nay. I think I'm taller.
And could you state your address just for the record, please?
I own 5329 Ben Davis, which is a unit at Applegate. I am totally confused now. The purpose of this meeting, because of possible problems we could have with rebuilding units if they got caught on fire or whatever. So really the purpose is to correctly rezone the entire complex from R18 to M15, which would then make it the whole thing, correct?
Correct.
We're not talking about doing anything else.
Correct.
I think there's a little misunderstanding. Just because you will classify it as RM15, it doesn't mean we can build on the swimming pool or the whatever. Thank you.
Correct.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Laurel Brown. I live at 5311 Lucky Clover Lane.
Okay.
I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification, and could we possibly put the map back up so that
Sure.
we can see that?
There
Would
you
that
go.
be possible? Okay. I would need the one that shows where the Applegate condos abut the neighborhood. There you go. Thank you. I know that you told us that the R18 had been zoned in 1973. The Applegate condos were zoned.
It was
at
actually
that.
beyond that.
It
The
was-
original zoning designation was R2A,
Okay, R2A.
which who
But
knows
it's
what that means.
basically been the single family dwelling since.
I think an
since that.
R2A originally was a multifamily.
Was it?
Be a zoning district,
Okay,
yes.
and then it just kind of rolled over into a, okay.
Yep.
So I guess there are several parts to my question, and maybe I'll just throw it all out there and have you just respond as best you can. I'm getting the impression from the presentation that the impetus for the meeting was to clear up zoning because of fire. Okay, fire danger. However, really the impetus of the meeting, I believe from the information I've gotten, was not because of fire danger, but that it was because the HOA for Applegate indeed came to you, and a Mr. Lind came representing the HOA. So I just clarify this if I'm wrong, representing the HOA, and has asked to have this change made for future development. This designated change for future development, for future land use. Okay, so that's kind of my first clarification I would like to have. Now, my husband and I have lived in that neighborhood since 1980, so not since the inception, but since the inception of that neighborhood, when indeed what was happening to Applegate condos is they were seeing a lot of development next door to them, okay? And at that time, and I don't have a pointer, so I'm just going to use my finger. If you see this little outcropping,
The little stub road.
the stubbed road,
Yes.
which is spring clover, right there, when we moved in, that was an open road. And we accessed what is now Murray Boulevard. We accessed that going through the private road of Applegate. Okay? My husband and I were trying to figure out how long it's been since they closed that off and started to use it for RV parking. But we think that it was probably, we moved in April of 1980, and we think it was at least within that calendar year, if not just within a few months, because I remember not being able to use it quite soon after we moved in. Okay, so that's been closed off for all intents and purposes since 1980. So we're talking, 38 years now for that. So
I'll have you wind up. Your 3 minutes.
okay, sorry.
No, you're good.
So my question is, right now we have an R18 designation that, were it to be changed to the proper designation, would be an R15, I believe.
RM15, correct.
RM15, excuse me. Okay, so because you're moving to a higher density level, will that then, just having changed that designation of the code there, require that Applegate have another egress and ingress?
Okay. Thank you for your question. I'm going to have you, we'll address it. Yes, we will address it. Hi.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Burke, and I live at 5265 South Grabenstein. I am an Applegate resident.
Okay.
And although I am for the redevelopment and voted for it with the majority of the owners, that's neither here nor there now. My understanding is even clearer as to why we need to be rezoned to multiple family units. And should there be any tragedy, such as a fire in my building or at my house, I definitely would want to be able to have that rebuilt. And that has nothing to do with whether we move forward with this redevelopment or not, whether it's approved or not. We need to be rezoned, bottom line. And so I really hope you take this into consideration and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Larry Payne. I live 869 West Spring Clover.
Hi.
A couple of questions regarding that. That RM15 zoning, what does it represent?
It is multifamily with up to
Multi-level,
15.
single family, I mean single level, multi-level. Can they stack
It can
in
be
3 or
up to
4 deep?
15 units per acre.
How high?
I think we'll give you an answer. I don't want to eat your time.
How many stories can you build there? Secondly, I'm a 40-year veteran, recently retired of the mortgage finance industry, having actually owned a company here for a number of years. Regarding rebuilding that property should it burn down, that would not be a problem except if it was caused by this particular body right here who would not allow them to rebuild if they applied for a permit. The insurance companies will pay that. The lenders are currently not concerned with that, having worked for a lender and made a number of loans in this particular project. So just so you have the facts in front of you, that is really not what is a driver here in my mind. It would just be what kind of density are we looking at? We're going to have ingress and egress issues. You get that many more units in there, I believe we all can recognize that there will have to be problems with fire and police access for ingress and egress. And so the current layout here, I suspect there'll be some changes and you'll have to have access to different roads in and out of there. That's one of the reasons I think a lot of the people are here tonight, is they want to see what impact that may have on the neighborhood that we live in back there. There's traffic concerns. We already have a tremendous flow of traffic through that neighborhood when school is in session. Horizon Elementary is a collector school. They bring kids from all over in there, and the traffic in there, if you try to go out of there in the morning about 8:30 to go to work, it is awful. It's just going to run more traffic through different ways in there. It's going to we'll take it from being a little quiet family neighborhood to something that we really don't care for. So just my comments.
All right, thank you. There's a lot of you here. I suggest not being shy.
My name is Lance Monson. I know a couple of you brethren in here, and I'm not for this thing at all. I live at 5325 Majestic Village. The first gentleman that spoke is my next door neighbor. We essentially, Applegate is our backyard on the other side of our property line. And when you're talking about rezoning, I can understand, but I think if in fact what Larry is saying, 40 years in the business, I think he probably knows what he's talking about. If something were to happen along those lines, we're talking that doesn't seem like that's going to be the end-all be-all for somebody who already lives in Applegate. You're talking about how many units per acre?
15.
15 units per acre. We said there's 23 acres in there.
Yeah, but in order for them to develop, they would have to sell the
Okay.
entire property,
And
tear
then
everything down,
my
and start
question
anew.
too,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the gentleman that spoke the very first says we're just knocking at the door. Well, I just assume close the door before you even start knocking, and that's how I feel about the whole deal. You start rezoning now. It's the first step. You talk about all these extra. Just think of all the meetings we're going to save everybody if we just knock it off right now. So. Anyway, do I want some multi-level at 15 units in my backyard looking down at me all the time? No. Kyle, it's good to see you, buddy. No, I don't. Lived there for 30 years, peaceful existence. These Applegate people have lived there for 30 plus years too. Those things, obviously anything can happen at any given time, sure, but it hasn't. So let's just leave things the way they are. Everybody's happy. So that's my comment.
Thank you. I will ask the public try to keep the here's down, just because we're trying to create a record so that some poor transcriptionist can type this out after the fact. And if there's a lot of background noise, it makes it very challenging for them. You want a robust record here, trust me. Hi.
Hi, I'm Kyle Lind. I'm the one who signed the application. I'm the president of the HOA, Applegate HOA. And I'm obviously for it. Besides, our purpose here tonight is to correct zoning. But further that, other issues of people are talking about, and there's a lot of land, a lot of excess land in Applegate. There were problems with the development when it originally happened, and I realized some of my neighbors, Lance, I went to school with Lance, we're both 61 years and residents of Murray. So I respect his opinion, but for those of us that live in Applegate, the vast majority, 85%, and it was legitimate, I will just throw that in, a legitimate vote. We went door to door, and it was voted for it because our HOA fees are huge, and we can't afford to take care of the land appropriately. And this is a move to not to mess up the area. We live there, so we would like it. We want it to stay good for everybody. But we just need some help, and this is a way for us to get the money that we need. The problems in Applegate are tremendous. We've identified over $3 million of work that needs to be done. There's been some problems in the past, many problems. I've lived in the area for the whole time, so I'm aware of problems with different HOAs. And we've got a new HOA board. We do a very, very good job. We're doing the best we can, but it's coming far short of all the needs that we have with the building and that. And development is a way and it can be done. There's a lot of excess land over there, and it's very expensive to maintain. So I just put my vote in there and hope people will consider it. There's 172 buildings over there, and hope people will realize that it's designated as a low income compared to the other places because of the condition of the place, and we just can't afford to get it back to the type of property it was at one time. So thank you.
Actually, can I ask you a question, since you are the HOA president? Have you guys had to issue a special assessment for any of the upkeep of the general property in the last 5 years?
Oh yes, we did. We just in 2017 we had a special assessment.
Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, let's see, and also we borrowed money, so we just barely, with that special assessment, we paid off the loan.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Dave Brown. I live at 5311 Majestic Village Circle. I have a couple of questions. One of them is basically this was built with correct zoning when it was built, and what's happened is things have changed, but the property hasn't changed. When it was built for that purpose, and I don't understand why the redevelopment has to be higher density anyway. There's no reason why the extra property couldn't be along a low density footprint, since it's in a low density area. Just off your map, you don't show this, but we are just awash in apartments. And I don't see why we need to have more encroachment on the single family dwellings than we have now. You go up Murray Boulevard and you've got apartments everywhere, plus you're building a gargantuan apartment complex on Vine Street. And all of that feeds into our neighborhood because all those people use common streets. When is the city going to recognize that there ought to be a place for single family people and not over commit a density in the middle of a single family neighborhood? And I don't know why you can't just grandfather what's there, since it was built appropriately years ago. That wasn't the problem. It's that the city is changing the zoning. The property's been there for many, many, many years. So that's my point. I think we have enough density. I think we should work it out on a lower density if we're going to redevelop.
All right, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Alex Hyam, and I live at 5264 South Rome Beauty Park. Everyone has pretty much touched on everything I was going to say, but I wanted to throw my 2 cents in anyway. So I am in favor of rezoning Applegate, as this appears to be a way to move forward with a possible opportunities to develop open space within our community. A development will bring in much needed revenue to update and majorly improve Applegate. For this reason, I stand here before you as a homeowner and also the secretary on the current HOA board and ask you to rezone Applegate to its proper zone. Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening.
Ron Barbano, 5363 Lucky Clover Lane. Their road is my backyard, like Lance too. This gentleman said that he wants to put more units in. That road, right now, any time of day or night, every time they go over a speed bump, it rattles anything that's on the walls. Anything. So all you're doing is putting in more people with more traffic. You figure every unit's going to have at least 2 more cars. And that's 2 more cars going over that road. And all the trash that's thrown over that fence into my yard, I don't know anybody else, they probably have the same problem. Beer cans, syringes, all this crap is coming over from that road right up against, I mean, it's literally 2 feet away from my fence line. 2 feet. And you're going to let these people put more units in to bring more traffic down there? I'm totally against it.
Good evening.
Christine Dunn, 5320 Majestic Village Circle. I'm going to approach this from a little different tact. I'm a retired school teacher who spent the bulk of my career teaching in a Title I school, which is what Horizon Elementary is. That means that it qualifies because there are so many low-income families feeding into it. The new development that you're putting in on Vine Street with who knows what's going to go across the street from that next to the EMI building, they say they're going to build it one thing and then it ends up being something else. We have neighbors that move into our neighborhood with young children. As soon as they get school age, they sell their homes and move out because they realize the impact it's having on our elementary schools. All of that affects all of our home values. So I think the northwest quadrant of Murray has had more than its fair share of high density. Look at some other places to put some of these things. Applegate's mismanagement is not our neighborhood's problem. I grant that it doesn't look very good up there, but to put the other road through that they might need, or the obvious that they need the money, that hurts all of us. And the more people coming into our elementary school, that hurts our elementary school. They're already throwing up portables. It's just going to be more of the same.
Thank you. Good evening.
I'm Marianne Parker. I have a dual role because I own a unit in Applegate at 5275 Rome Beauty. I am a homeowner at 835 Lucky Clover Circle, whose backyard is against the Applegate property. I strongly and adamantly oppose this. I don't know how my Applegate vote counted because I went to the meeting. I talked to the president, I talked to a couple of the board, and I said I wasn't ready to vote that particular night. They had to have the vote in the next night. I was never contacted at my home. I contacted them that night at that meeting, but I don't know how my vote ever went in there, whether I was put down as one that opposed it or was the one that was for it. But I am strongly opposed to it. I feel that this is a first step to development that they have said they have wanted. I am strongly opposed to development in my backyard of additional units. I am opposed to the burden it will be on the roads, on the utilities, on the schools of Murray City. I was resident of Murray City since I was born, as we sat back here on the first case, conditional use, I turned to my husband and said, that was the neighborhood I grew up in. That was so-and-so's property. So I've lived in Murray and seen Murray develop. But I strongly oppose this because first step in the door always leads to more. And the majority of the people here, I dare say, is against the more. We cannot see why we cannot keep the zoning that was originally in place as it was properly developed back then. Why is it not grandfathered and corrected by the city to today's standards? It's not our problem that the city changed the zoning. It's the city leaders' problem that they changed the zoning along from Applegate. It's not our problem that the schools are being impacted by all the low-income housing that's surrounding our beautiful neighborhood. We're getting all these apartment buildings. Applegate has been there. It was a part of the community as it grew. But the new buildings, the Hunter's Woods, the apartment over on Vines that they're building, those places were not, but they still impact us as a neighborhood. They impact our streets, they impact the city's utilities, water, sewer, electricity, everything that we have. And yet we, the residents in single-family housing, and even the residents in Applegate, are all being affected by the services and by the move-in people. And like I said, I am here to voice my strong opposition in every way possible to this because I don't think it's right for the community.
Great, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Ronald Dunn, 5320 Majestic Village Circle. You heard from my wife a couple of minutes ago on the educational front. I'm glad I came because I've learned that this really isn't the innocuous zoning change that I was led to believe, that Kyle over here gave us the real reason they want to develop it, because the mismanagement and the embezzlement that raided their HOA fund, drained it to nothing is what I was told, will be adjusted in terms of expanding the development conceivably by an additional 173 units. Multiplying the acreage times the number of units I just heard here gave me one number, 345 minus the 172 existing units to be conceivably.
That's misinformation.
Yeah, that would never fly.
That's totally
that would that is a gross exaggeration of what would be possible or potentially possible.
That number was the existing units.
Yeah.
Well, it was with existing units and beyond. There's no way.
There was no discussion about further units. It was existing units.
That's not even being discussed tonight.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, what we've heard is the real reason here is this is a fundraising activity for the HOA from Applegate at the expense of the neighborhood, from which you've already heard a number of residents, including me, and I've lived here 32 years. I would like to see the neighborhood continue without being sacrificed to offset Applegate's mismanagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Dave Dodds. I live at 5123 South Lucky Clover Lane, and I'm here to voice my opposition to this. You mentioned, I kind of look at it from a political standpoint, you mentioned that this is the first step of maybe 20 or 30 steps for rezoning. Clearly the intent is to rezone. Let's consider the time of your time and stop this now, what it needs to be stopped now, and then that considers your time, so you don't have to have us all show up here 20 more times. So that'd be my recommendation.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Kathleen Keith. I live at 5307 Ben Davis Park. I'm a resident of Applegate. And I just wanted to kind of, after listening to everybody here, wanted to say that I'm in favor of this, and kind of hurt my feelings when they call this those people. I just want you to know. And if it ever happened, if there was ever any additional units put in there, you would think that you would like the sore thumb that you guys talk about to look a little better, and maybe your home value would go up, and you wouldn't talk about meals going over the fence. I'm kind of very, I just don't like that at all. Just wanted to voice my opinion. I'm a new resident there, and I like my home, and I don't like to be talked to about that, and I think this would be a good thing. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hi,
my
how are
name
you?
is Nikki Yule, and I live at 5358 South Baldwin Park, and I've been there 24 years. I'm the former board president through 15, came out of the embezzlement. My concern is, of course, I did not vote for it. The reason being is that there was a lot of misinformation, and the way they gathered the votes was, according to our bylaws and everything, was done inappropriately. They went door to door. They gave them information such as there would be no more assessments. I did address that with the board president. He said, well, we can't promise that. I did ask them to rescind that. They did not. My question also tonight for you is that I've got a lot of residents, since I was on the board recently, that come to me and they want to know, since they were misinformed, and there's been different stories about they're going to build houses that are 2 to 3 stories high, or some people were told they were going to be condominiums, which I have no problem with adding a few more condominiums. We wanted to do that to help because we came out, I was the president after the embezzlement. And so I do understand the complications there. The problem is I have a lot of homeowners asking me if they can rescind their vote because they were told, they were lied to basically, or given wrong information. Can you answer that for me?
We can't. Unfortunately, it's a private matter, as Mr. McNulty has suggested.
Okay. So I mean, I guess that would take, I guess we'd have to do a special meeting or something and get signatures.
Yeah.
Okay. But I do want you to be aware of that, and I was told, someone was contacted on just Thanksgiving, saying they needed 4 more votes to get to their votes on Thanksgiving, and the papers were due on Monday. So my concern is the same as one of the other homeowners. How did they come up with from 2/3 to 85 in 3 days when they were short? So there are a lot of concerns, and like I said, I've been there a long time, so I've seen a lot of the crazy stuff, and been through it, and was part of rebuilding the community. And when somebody else said we were completely broke. Oh, and by the way, we don't have 23.5 acres. I was the board president that signed the UDOT when they took 2 of our acres and expanded the road on 7th West. So basically, it's more like 21, maybe 21.5, just to set the record straight. So basically, that's my concern, is that the way this was done, and they did finally have a real meeting, but we got totally different information than what the other homeowners got when they went door to door. So there's just a lot of confusion. And as far as the zoning, I don't really understand. If it's not really going to affect us, why we can't be grandfathered in? Is there any reason that Murray City, that you guys cannot do something to grandfather us so that we're in compliance with the zoning?
Okay, we will ask that question of staff when we're finished.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Richard Hanson. I live at 5269 Lucky Clover Lane. My house is right at the end of where you cut the map off. So the little road that was originally part of the road that ran from Murray Boulevard, now Murray Boulevard, to Lucky Clover Lane, goes right beside my house. And I see a lot of my neighbors here. And the big thing is, we wondered, is the sky falling? That's the first thing, because somebody had to precipitate the whole thing that's going to be happening here on the rezoning. Somebody wants to develop that land. Don't tell me stories about it, because that's what happens in all of these cases. I've lived there for 40 years. It was a number of years ago that we had to rezone our entire area there. Nobody's mentioned it here, because originally it was when was this, 1980? What? And we redid that so that now it's essentially R1 through there, and that's the way that it stayed. Now, if they redo the area that is available in the park, and they maintain the same kind of density per square foot, if you will, that shouldn't present any kind of a program, but I can't see anybody doing that. And I say that because I looked at what happened on the Vine Street and Commerce. What they've got there is the ghetto of tomorrow. I can't believe that they allowed that kind of density. I don't know if any of you people were involved, but who was ever involved ought to be strung up by the yard arm.
It is a different zoning district, just for clarification.
Good, good.
Out of line.
Okay.
Your
That's
comments
out of line?
are out of line. That's enough.
Good enough for you. Good enough for me. I've said all I wanted to say. I don't think that who was ever in charge did it right at that time, and we were all afraid of that kind of thing happening again. That's why they're here. Okay. I'm going to sit down.
Good evening, ma'am.
Kathy Bridge, 825 Lucky Clover Circle. You notice you have a lot of Lucky Clover residents up here. Obviously, you see what's going to be developed. We've known it was going to be developed as soon as we got the zoning. We've had 40 blissful summers since I've been here, and we know now what's coming. They're no longer going to be blissful. I've learned a lot about my son-in-law who built a house. They came in, developed right next to him. He now wakes up to a great big house. His whole view is gone. So I just really hope that I don't have a say in it, but I hope this doesn't go through, because as you can see, there's a lot of Lucky Clover residents who their backyards are literally going to be these buildings.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hello. I'm Alma Haskell. I'm at 5287 Clover Meadow Drive. A lot of people have already questioned the idea of whether or not a legal non-conforming use could be rebuilt if a calamity struck. I would add to that question, could it be improved if those improvements are within the original scope of what was approved for that development back in the 70s? And from my background, I would think that yes, it both could be rebuilt, and yes, it could be improved as long as it's within the original. So that's a good question. Back of the napkin calculations, and you can confirm these or refute them in either way is fine. There's about 170 units there now. This rezone, if it's 21.5 acres, could allow up to 250. With the acreage, if it's more, 23 or so, it'd be 270. That's, within the, what is that, 60 to 80 more units. I'm not positive that that's a huge impact myself, so I'm neither for or against this. I just want to point out that the city council is the one who has to decide based on input here, based on the needs in the city for affordable housing, based on the needs for this whole valley of the growth that is coming our way. Developments like the one next to the track station, where there's very good access, I think, are a good idea. This close to a single family neighborhood, the city council needs to weigh that and decide. Regarding the road connectivity, generally I'm for more connectivity between places. I would presume that if an application came to redevelop this spot, there would be some sort of traffic analysis done to study what the impacts are on the neighborhood. My gut feel is that the people in Applegate will take the easier route to 700 West and turning right there and then turning right onto 53rd. There might be some cut through traffic through our neighborhood. I imagine our neighborhoods will produce more cut through traffic through Applegate if those connections are made than the other way around. I could be wrong. I'd like to see traffic studies if something comes up. What definitely would improve if there are connections between the neighborhood and Applegate is the ability of neighbors who go to school together, who go to church together, who otherwise associate together, to connect easier without having to go a long way around, even if those connections are only a pedestrian type connection, not an automobile. So those are my main comments. I would also ask whether or not this property could be subdivided if this zoning goes through. It seems like probably not, because the PUD originally probably had some open space requirements that they had to fulfill. I assume all of those requirements would have to continue. And then one other question I didn't write down is, if the homeowners association's bylaws for obtaining votes were not followed, I would imagine that the city could postpone decisions on this until that is resolved and taken care of through whatever legal means, whatever residents who have concerns in Applegate bring against the association or bring up that way. So those are my comments and questions. Thank you.
Good evening.
Jerry Patterson, 5341 Majestic Village Circle. And when I bought my last home, I lived in various places over the decades here in Salt Lake, but before I bought the last home, I looked for about 4 months just at neighborhoods and areas before I looked at one house. And the main reason why I moved into the neighborhood adjacent to Applegate, my backyard, by the way, is right next to Applegate, like some of my neighbors here. And I also have a speed bump that's right across there, and my dishes rattle also when some of the people disregard that, is because of the density in the neighborhood, the low density. If I wanted something that was higher density, I would have bought a different house or a cheaper house or something, but that was the number one reason I moved there, and I'd like to see it stay the same. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Good evening.
My name's Deborah Rossi, and I live at 877 West Spring Clover Drive. I'm not for it either, and I do feel sorry for Applegate for their financial problems. I'll say that from the start. When my son bought a condo on the east side of Murray, they tripled his HOA the very first month he was there because they had some mismanagement problems. We dealt with it for 10 years, finally got rid of it. That's one of the facts of home ownership. When you've got a problem, you end up having to swallow it, and that's not for the neighborhood to swallow. I'm, along with Chris, I teach at a Title I school. I will tell you right now, over at Horizon, I have many friends at Horizon, and we have lost many of the experienced teachers at Horizon because the complexity of the school has changed, and it has gotten to be a much tougher school to teach in. And as a result, the neighborhood is already suffering from the high density things that we're having happen around us. I live on, like I said, Spring Clover, and my kids are all grown now, but I will tell you that people cut through that neighborhood already, constantly, from 7th over. And I still remember one time when my son was little and I went outside and a car was coming around the corner and stopped and missed him by a foot. That is already an area where people are coming through. I am totally opposed to anyone's child having more traffic coming through that neighborhood. People do not act in a responsible manner. I told the neighbors, I said, if this thing goes through, I want a speed bump in front of every house. So, I mean, having walked out there and seeing that car, when I screamed, stop, within a foot of my child, I don't think anybody should have to go through that. And I think that that's really unfair to expect the neighborhood to do that when we deliberately have chosen a neighborhood where we thought that the kids could play and do things. And yes, they need to be careful, but at the same time, it's not the same as when I've lived in apartments or condos. I know that the rules are different. And so I think that that's really important. I think we live in a great area, but I do believe, for what it's worth, that for some reason a blind eye is turned to the west side. And we get a lot more development on the west side than necessarily we do on the east side. And I think that we need to look at that, and we need to spread that out and not overload the schools on the west side as well as the ingress and egress. And I live on the street where that point comes. I am 4 houses from that point. And if they open that up and people are cutting through from Applegate, it will totally destroy, in my opinion, the value of the neighborhood. So it's a beautiful neighborhood. I've enjoyed Murray. I'm not from Utah. I've lived other places. I like my open space. I like green. I like all of those things. And that's one of the reasons I chose to live in Murray, and I hope it's not taken away from us.
Thank you.
Oh, I have one last comment.
I'll give it to you.
Thank you. I don't believe there's a single person here that would be so inhumane that if somebody's unit burned down would not give them an exception to rebuild. I just don't believe that. I believe that's nothing more than a scare tactic that somebody has tried to put on everybody so everybody would be going, oh no, oh no. And I don't believe there's a single person sitting here who would be that inhumane. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, my name's Lois Hubner. I live at 774 West Lucky Clover Lane. I have a couple things that I wanted to say, kind of similar to what Ron Barbano said, but slightly different. I also have my backyard up against the little road in Applegate. And because of the way the ground slopes, if anything is built just on the other side of that road, even if it's like only 2 stories, they will look right into all my back windows, right into my yard, even if I were to enclose the fence that's now just a chain link. So it feels like privacy, and any hope to be looking at something other than somebody else's window will be gone. So that's one thing. A second thing has to do with the amount of traffic that's already going through that back road. It's not too bad during the day, but once it gets to be evening, people will go and they actually park sort of perpendicular on the road and shine their lights into our house. I don't know what they're doing, but cars can sit there for 10, 15, 20 minutes just shining lights into our house. And sometimes if I go out there, I can scare them away, if you can believe that. But so that concerns me. If we have more traffic and more people back there, that sort of whatever it is that's going on that back road will get worse. The other thing that 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more than that, my daughter had a stalker and an assailant who was terrifying, but he would use that back road into Applegate and just hop over the fence into our yard, and then when the police came, would hop back over the fence and escape through 7th West. Now, I know that's our particular problem. I don't know that anyone else is having that, but it makes me nervous that the more development that there is, the more people there are walking through, both on the front sides of our houses and the back sides of our houses, the more sense of vulnerability we have, especially if there's anything going on with any family member when someone else has an agenda against them or wishes them harm. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Chris Reed, 5265 Rome Beauty Park. I just have a quick question. If it is rezoned to this multifamily, is there anything that states that somebody can't come in and build a 6-story apartment complex? Or would they have to come in and essentially buy out all the land and redevelop it from there?
Okay. We'll have staff address that.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Colleen Brown. I live on 5311 Majestic Village Circle. I have a couple of concerns. Quite honestly, when coming to this meeting tonight, I had not made a decision. I was determined I wasn't going to say anything. And the longer I sit here, the more uncomfortable my chair gets. And that is because I can't sit still any longer. I strongly feel that there is a compromise available. That compromise has been presented by more than one person here tonight. That compromise is, let's grandfather the clause. Let's grandfather those units in so they are covered in the event of a disaster, fire, flood, whatever it might be. They need to be, those people didn't buy those condos thinking down the road, my condo's not going to be covered if it catches fire and burns. We need to take into consideration the people who live there, who have lived there long term, and who bought their condos in good faith. My other concern here tonight is I'm not sure how many of the residents that we have heard from that live in Applegate actually own that property. That would be interesting for me, and I think some others, to know how many people that we've heard from actually live in the project that is being considered. I think as far as the financial problem of Applegate, as my neighbor mentioned, that's not of our doing. I have great empathy for those people that live in those condos that they were taken advantage of. I think there are ways that can be worked around if the zoning remains the same, that these problems can be addressed. There's a lot of property available in Applegate condominiums that could be developed not as high density as what we're talking about, but same density as what is existing, that would help alleviate the financial problems of the homeowners association. As I've sat here longer tonight, I would say my vote has definitely been changed to I'm not in favor of this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you. My name is Deborah Ng. I live at 5330 Majestic Village Circle. I'm here, all my neighbors have already given input that they don't want it. I also think there's alternatives the commission can utilize in their toolbox to make another decision on how to get the zoning to what is required in your plan, but not increase the development of the Applegate community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give you one last call. Going once. Going twice. Ms. McFadden, I can only let one comment per person. I'm sorry. All right, with that, I will close public comment, and I will have Mr. Smallwood come back up. And oh, well, there you go. We'll bring you all up.
Good.
Okay. So a couple of themes I hear. First off, I'm just going to ask a couple pointed questions right up front, and then I'll let you address some of the themes. Okay. So we did have a question earlier about height in an RM15 zone.
Yes.
What is the maximum height for?
The maximum height there is 40 feet.
40 feet. So it's 5 feet higher than what is allowed in the current zoning. So right now, currently, someone could build a 35-foot tall home in that property.
Single family house.
Single
That's
family
correct.
in that house. Okay. So we're talking 5 feet. Okay. Grandfathering.
That's something I kind of wanted to address, and I think I'm going to have Jared address this point here. Yeah.
So grandfathering is the common term for legal non-conforming uses.
Correct.
And I'm not going to get the names right, but the gentleman, the veteran, was correct. Legal non-conforming uses under Utah State Code and under Murray's codes, if they're established as legal non-conforming uses, can be rebuilt to their existing standards. Mr. Haskell asked about improving upon them if they're within those codes where they were originally permitted. I'm not sure about that. I'd have to research further to know if they could be improved upon or changed. Generally speaking, if it's legal non-conforming, it has to be built to the same footprint, height, etc. that it was previously. Obviously, building codes have changed, and the electrical changed, and things like that. But financing and things like that are easier to get if you're conforming. It's not impossible to get financing if you're legal but non-conforming, but you need to be established as legal and non-conforming. That's difficult in a situation like the Applegate condominiums, where there are lots and lots and lots and lots of property owners. If I might go on from the legal non-conforming. Oh, sure. I'm sorry about that. To go on from the to segue from the legal non-conforming status, again, the zoning being changed, and I think this is a point that needs to be made again. The zoning changing from R18 to RM15 is not the same thing. Somebody asked, is there something that states that you can't come in if the zoning has changed and redevelop the whole thing as a 600 unit or 6-story apartment complex? There's not something that states that, but there are 172 owners that have to vote to sell their properties together. This is a group-owned condominium project. This is not a blank slate. This is not a single piece of property to be redeveloped very easily. This is a very challenging piece of property for redevelopment, and we've said that to the Applegate Homeowners Association when they first contacted us a number of months ago. There's a lot of challenges to this, and the first and foremost of them is that you have a whole bunch of owners that have to vote for all of these things all along the way and want to do it. So there's not a single line in our code books that says thou shalt not develop a 6-story apartment building on this complex if it's rezoned to RM15. You can only build 40 feet for starters, and you have to meet density limits, and there are lots of other logistical problems that have to do with secondary access roads, public streets. We don't subdivide on private streets. The Applegate Way would have to be made a public road. These are all things that have to be considered, and as was mentioned a couple of times, none of that is before us. None of it has been considered None of it has been researched by staff. The only thing in front of us and the only thing we've considered to date is the validity and the appropriateness of saying we are an existing multifamily development in a single family zone. Would it be more appropriate to rezone us to multifamily development? And the resounding answer for staff is yes. Regardless of what comes after, that's a very complicated question. But in terms of what it does, the effect that it has, the immediate effect and the of that rezoning would be nothing. The immediate effect of that rezoning is it's easier to answer the questions of appraisers when they call and ask what a certain property, if it's non-conforming or if it's conforming. We get to start saying conforming. That's for us the only immediate effect. Other than that, we have to look at applications. We have to look at the background, how it was approved. We have records to find from 1973. That'll be a full-time 2-week job for Zach when it comes up. Finding the records from 1973, that's not going to be easy to look at those kinds of things. But we haven't been able to answer any of those questions or really speak to them because we don't have data to work with. The only answer that we can give you about the question of the appropriateness of zoning, after listening to all the comments and empathizing with the concerns, our staff recommendation is still that the rezoning is appropriate, and therefore also the general plan amendment, regardless of anything that may or may not happen after or other applications. The existing use should be zoned RM15.
And the original use was a multifamily. Multifamily. What year did that designation change?
What year did it change? I couldn't tell you.
You don't know.
Again,
it would be part of the
77. Zach thinks, but it's
okay.
Hard to determine. So.
Jared,
did that make sense for the non-conforming?
It did. And one thing that I'd like you to just address a little bit, all of the concerns that we've had tonight, mostly from the neighborhood, about density, about ingress and egress, and all of these various issues. That's an example of all of the things that would have to be considered if there were any change in this property.
Yes.
There are no easy answers to those.
Right.
And that just illustrates how complicated it would be to do anything with this property in the future. And we don't know of any plan to do anything right now. All we're dealing with is cleaning up the zoning, trying to get a uniform zone that matches our master plan, correct? Our general plan.
That's correct.
Okay.
And very well said, actually. Thank you.
Can you address, either of you, I guess, really fast, the legal parameters that we are under? Because I know a lot of people want us to keep it how it is or find some kind of compromise, but there's a legal process to, once this application is made, if they meet all of the legal requirements, we are obligated to do some things under the law, right?
Obligated is not the word I would use.
Right,
but,
correct, thank you.
The staff's, and we're kind of as staff in the same position. We have to look at the application, or what we're obligated to do, I guess, is to look at the application that we have on its merits. And its merits are as simple as we described. It's a multifamily property. If we were not, and it's a condominium property as well, the density that's allowed by the zone that we are talking about applying to the property, the density allowed by that is the smallest consideration in a redevelopment of that property. We have multiple property owners. We have subdivision that would be required that's not allowed on a private road. We have access issues. We have all kinds of other things. So on the merits of the application in front of us, we view it as staff as something that ought to be done. We don't see a reason not to do that, and it would make things more conforming, and that's always the direction we would go. So we'll recommend that to you. And our recommendation is that you would recommend that to council. They have to make the final decision, obviously, but our recommendation would be based on the application that we have. And we shouldn't, with rezoning, consider the possibilities of a single, we shouldn't consider a project when we're talking about rezoning. We should consider, as a group, the Planning Commission should consider all of the things that are possible in that new zone, and whether that's appropriate or not in the case that you have. And right now you have developed property, and the RM15 zone is entirely appropriate for that developed property, more appropriate than the R18. So we very simply recommend approval. Yeah, and that's a good point, Jim. Thank you. So RM15 is the name of the zone, but the base density of the RM15 zone is 12 units to the acre. You have to do a lot of specialty things to get to. Yeah, it's an up to number, up to 12 units to the acre, and that's kind of the base consideration. But then you have all of the logistical problems and the logistics of the sites that kind of dictate what number you actually get to. So whether a new portion of that development would come out to be 12 units to the acre, we couldn't really say. We'd have to be looking at site plans and other things.
Right, because you have parking considerations, you have new roads that may need to be,
access, traffic,
open
as
space.
well. All of those things would have to be considered. So whether it gets to 12 units to the acre, I don't know. And the name is confusing. I apologize on behalf of whoever decided to name it RM15. I've had one successful case of getting the bonus density. It's just difficult to do, and in a situation where you have a developed property, probably impossible. The highest would be 12 units to the acre. And that would be for the new portion. I don't think anyone is just, although I just preached about not talking about a specific application. No one's talked to us about increasing density in the Applegate project. They're talking about trying to sell land and develop that way. So just to be clear, does that make sense?
Yes. Were there additional?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, please.
Jared, we've heard a lot of comments from the audience here about their disbelief perhaps in the homeowners association misperceptions. Is there anything that we can do legally as far as homeowners association and the residents, both the community residents and the residents within the homeowners association, before we take an action or before the city council would take an action?
No, I don't believe that it would be your place. We received an application signed by the homeowners association president. His signature was notarized. We have to take that at face value. If the homeowners association feels like that is not representative of the truth or the current situation, then there are steps, I'm sure, within their bylaws that would allow them to kind of go back to that and say, hey, we want to direct the homeowners association president to withdraw the application because we don't any longer feel like this is appropriate, or we don't feel like it was representative. Those are steps that would be appropriate. It takes a while for us to get an application like this, if it gets a recommendation from the planning commission, to the city council. You could continue the application, although that's neither here nor there, and you'd have to be doing it to direct them to do something, and I don't know how appropriate that would be. They seem to have a pretty good handle on what they feel about the votes and things, and if they want to pursue that, there are avenues for them to do that within their own private HOA, and I don't think we should get involved in that. Just that's my opinion as your staff.
Mr. Hall, can I actually have council come in for just a moment and just give me the thumbs up on direction we're hearing here? Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for talking.
Of course. So on the question, are you asking about the HOA specifically?
Correct. Does the city have any sort of recourse against the HOA or any way to mandate things from the HOA outside of the normal application process that we have?
The city really doesn't. It's, as I believe was mentioned earlier, the city's not a party to the HOA. We look at the applications that are brought in. Those affidavits, notarized, are what the city has to take at face value. Again, if there are challenges to a vote of an HOA, that would be a separate civil matter, something the city's not involved in. It's just, again, not a party to that.
Okay, perfect. That's what I needed to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, more questions for staff. Discussion.
This is maybe off topic a little bit, but a lot of people did bring up a comparison density to the Vine Street and Commerce. Can you just address that zoning and why that density is different than what we are talking about tonight? This isn't the first time I've heard stuff about that particular development, and I know maybe this is an opportunity to just give some clarity about what's happening in these two different places.
Sure. So as I recall, and Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, the housing that's going in on Vine Street is part of the mixed use development zone that is intended to be near transit for higher development with closer access to transit, and a lot of the development around that, as we find it more a smarter growth to intensify housing near transit stations. So those are going to be much higher densities than what would be proposed here at Applegate. This is a medium density. It's not a high density zoning area. So,
So that density would not be allowed
Not
in
at
this
all.
zoning because it's totally
yeah, the zoning in mixed use is 70 units per acre for that specific property.
right. And I heard a lot about low income, and that can you talk about mixed use and low income in regards to that development?
I believe that those are almost all market rate they will all be market rate housing. Nothing will be considered, it will all, there's no income restriction there. Housing, it's just not even.
The developer did not apply for any federal credits for low-income housing.
Correct.
So that affecting this neighborhood and this rezoning affecting this neighborhood as far as increasing density or making the zoning match what is currently here would have no to very little impact on any kind of effects on the houses it's surrounding.
That's correct.
Or in more common layman terms, we don't know if it's positive or negative. For all we know, there'll be all physicians living in that facility.
Right. It's not.
Right.
The zoning won't affect.
A change of zoning here will not affect, will not impact the neighboring area just by the rezone.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that you're aware. It is in a mixed-use zone. The property you're talking about on Vine and Commerce is known as the Murray Crossing Apartment. That approach is quite high density, about 60 units per acre, because it's within a quarter mile of transit. That's the reason that project was put there, because you can walk. It's walk-up ridership right across the street and get on the tracks for the front runner. So Murray Central Station allows for people in the area to walk and either utilize a front runner system or a track system. That's not anything that this neighborhood would entertain or we would even consider in this particular case. Again, I know there's a lot of anticipation and concerns and issues, and we understand that, but again, we have one process here that you're reviewing, and you'll make a recommendation, yay or nay, to the council. Those of you in attendance, just so you know, in about a month, this item would be heard by the city council, and you're all welcome to attend.
Encouraged.
And encouraged and welcome to attend, and you'll have a chance to comment once again for your elected officials. And they are the approval or denial authority for the city on a situation like a rezone, a general plan amendment, changes to our city code, things of that nature. So that opportunity will allow itself, and you'll also get another public notice like you would have received for this particular meeting. So there will be another opportunity. There's a lot of things out there when we say grandfathering, that's tough. Yes, that term is used in our world in planning and zoning and building and safety, but we have a hearings officer that functions in the city of Murray rather than a board of adjustment. For years you've heard the term board of adjustment, and it was a group of people. We now have a hearing officer. We have 3 of them, and they kind of rotate. But for us to make a decision on grandfathering, every single owner would have to come in and ask for that determination from a hearings officer. So that's very complicated and thorough. And no, we're not inhumane, and we would have to take a look at it. But it's very difficult, like right now, to build in an R18. It's what is there is non-conforming. It's not allowed under the current zoning. So the R2A zone, way back when, allowed for that. No, that zone is no longer on the books in the city. We don't have that zone. It's long been removed 30, 40 years ago, 77, and we're now in 2018. So 40 plus years ago since that zone existed. So we have new zoning requirements, and we look at each project case by case. So if something like this is approved at the council level, they go through the next process, and that could take a long time because there'll be a lot of studies, a lot of meetings. Nothing's ever a guarantee in this world. Zoning and these kind of projects are always a process and a roll of the dice. So that's what I would say. So thank you for letting me talk for a minute.
And I just want to also just clarify as well that if this rezoning does go through, that there would be ample opportunity to address any project information, or if we receive an application for a project, you guys would be noticed again, and that you guys would be more than welcome to come back and speak to the actual issues that may present themselves during that application.
Thank you. Do we have any additional questions for staff? No, unfortunately, we've closed public comment. Thank you. We've still closed public comment. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say a couple of things.
Please.
After listening to the comments in that tonight, and I'm very grateful for everyone being here tonight. And that leads me to my first comment. I'll be damned if I'm going to throw away the democratic process and eliminate meetings just because decisions are tough. That's the last thing we're going to do. No one here would be happy if we didn't pursue this. So any suggestion that we save ourselves the grief is a huge mistake. In any area in this country, in this community, we need to hear people, we need to hear different opinions, and we need to make decisions. The other thing that I am really concerned with is Applegate dying on the vine. Okay? If this community continues to go down, then your neighborhood is going to be severely impacted slowly over time, because the value of these apartments, these condos, will continue to deteriorate. They won't have the money to improve the property. You will get more and more undesirable people in there. You're going to have more and more problems. I see this as a potential asset for Murray. I would like to take this opportunity to allow them to try and improve the place. Who knows? We've talked about the hurdles to any development. They're going to be massive. Everything you folks have brought up tonight is accurate with, density, proximity to neighborhoods, traffic, ingress, egress. These are not things that are just swept under the table. I don't know how a developer could propose something that would actually work, to be very honest with you right now, without seeing something in front of me. I don't think it's possible. But that doesn't mean that we can't allow what is right to take place in terms of current code. And that's the way I feel.
Okay.
I'd like to make some comment also.
Please.
So again, I asked the question whether there's some real legal recourse to this, and we heard that there isn't. But I would recommend that the homeowners association in Applegate spend some real quality time with the residents within Applegate, and for that matter, with the residents that border Applegate, and really come to some resolution of what some of the other solutions might be to the existing situation that Mr. Markham refers to. Because I live in the community right there behind Applegate, and see that it is a significant benefit to the community. And my recommendation, again, to really spend some time before this goes farther to the city council for any kind of permanent action.
My feeling is that, if we're going to talk about grandfathering things in, which isn't the city process of how this works, but Applegate is grandfathered then. They were there before all of the houses were there. They are older than anything else that was built around it. So making the city map designation match what is the density that is already there, I don't see a big argument about why not to do that, because the neighbors, the single family residents around it grew after it. It doesn't make it that it's not. It already is a multifamily property. So our zoning map and our general plan map should match what is currently existing, regardless of whatever gets proposed. There is no proposal. This was already there, and it is a medium density residential property.
I agree with your statement. It was what its original designation was to begin with. It got changed at some point in time. We're oblivious to that process. It happened. But I agree with you. It's what it was. It's
And
what it
has
is.
always been.
Right. Nothing has changed.
And regardless of whatever could future happen, it already is a medium density residential property.
And I fundamentally believe with 172 plus units in there, it's really challenging to get enough people to come together and actually be able to move forward with any proposal. It's challenging, especially if you have people that don't live on site, being able to get them to the meetings, actually have the majority of people at the meeting that you need to have. Rest assured that this is contentious in the neighborhood, which means that there's a high likelihood that someone is going to sue the HOA over any potential actions, and that's a whole other set of problems that the HOA has to deal with. I don't think this is a straightforward action in any way, shape, or form.
Just in the spirit of participating, because I haven't said much, I just want to state that I strongly support the statements made by Commissioner Markham and Commissioner Hacker that were well stated. We need to, and I believe the whole public and the commission believes, support the democratic process. And we all support trying to maintain and improve the community. And that's the end goal. And please, as a community, talk to each other to see how this could be best done.
More conversation, or I have two separate motions that I would need for anything to move forward.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. I'd make a motion that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for requesting general plan amendment changes to the land use designation of the property address at 770 West Applegate Drive from low density residential to medium density residential.
I have a motion by Mr. Hacker to forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested general plan amendment changing the land use designation for the property address 770 West Applegate Drive from low density to medium density residential.
I'll second.
I have a second by Mr. Markham. Call for a vote, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. That motion carries. So the general plan, we forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council. Do I have a motion on the rezone?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested zone map amendment for the property located at 770 West Applegate Drive from R18 to RM15.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Markham. The Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for the requested zone map amendment for the property located at 770 West Applegate Drive from R18 to RM15. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Who am I giving it to?
Go Sue.
Mrs. Wilson. Call for a vote, please. Wilson, yes, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. The zone map amendment forwarded onto the City Council passes. All right, so that is it for the formal agenda this evening. I would encourage all of you to remain active in this process. You will be noticed more than once, so please continue to come to the meetings, voice your concerns, and as has been suggested, as neighbors, you guys need to talk. There are a lot of problems that you may be able to solve just amongst the two communities that may make any future project more palatable for everybody. So I do encourage you to continue to talk with your neighbors. All right, Mr. McNulty.
Thanks. So we have some follow-up items that we need to talk about. So the first is the APA conference on October 4th and 5th. Travis, I know that you're going to be joining staff. Zach and Susan will be attending with you. I just want to put a feeler out that this is your last opportunity to register by tomorrow. If you have any interest in going, we're happy to send you, and it's October 4th and 5th at Jordan Commons in Sandy. So just give Susan a call in the morning or sometime tomorrow, and we'll register you so you can attend.
It's really fun to hang out with geeky planners.
Yeah. Ms. Milkevich, if you'd like to attend, let Susan know. You're the vice chair right now, so that's up to you. And anyone else on the Planning Commission, if you'd like to attend, please feel free.
Okay, and that's October 4th and 5th?
It's a Thursday, Friday, October 4th and 5th. It's all day. They do have one day one-day registration. However, it's not split in half like I wish it would be. It's probably 2/3 of the price of the overall registration.
And
so
you get a
can't
Trax
go
pass.
for one day. Yeah. And then the other item
Really
we
live
have
planning.
is I wanted to let you know we're going to have that PC training on August 22nd.
Right.
It's a Wednesday night, 6 to 7:30 down at Development Services, our building. We're planning on about an hour and a half. We'll have food. Bryant and I have been talking about some of the things we'll be discussing as far as the LUDMA training, being that the Planning Commission is the land use authority for the city, and some of the changes we're contemplating in Title 16 of the subdivision ordinance. He and GL are also well versed in Jones and Vine and kind of what went into that decision, and they'd like to discuss that.
We would very much like some
We want to
feedback.
talk about that.
And some of the good and bad and ugly that happened there.
Yep.
So we'll put you in light and bring you
And
up
in
to date
place.
with all of that, because I'll be learning some of that too,
Okay.
because I know bits and pieces, but I don't know the whole story.
Okay.
And then our next meeting will be on August 16th, 2 weeks from tonight, and you've seen the agenda there. I wanted to let you know that I've been working with Bryant Farnsworth, our deputy city attorney, on the sign code. We're going to be trying to bring that to you soon for a discussion. It may be the first meeting in September, but we want to start moving forward on that. As you know, it was kind of put on the back burner for a while. Legal staff has advised us in the last few weeks that we can move forward on it. We've been working pretty hard on it. Zach will be working on some graphics for it in the next few weeks to continue that effort. Brad did about 50% before he left. So
I hope they're computer graphics.
yeah,
You're not going to draw
They're going to
anything,
be
are you?
Illustrator. No, those graphics from 1971 that are in the current code that look like scratch paper on the back of a napkin. You know,
Someone
doodlings.
spent a lot of time at their kitchen table
They
drawing
did,
those.
but they were basically doodles. We're looking to have a very good code. And then the big thing that we had to wait for, and Bryant and GL did a great job, is their findings on Reed versus the town of Gilbert. And that's the big thing that has changed sign codes throughout the country, that we allow for freedom of speech, that we don't do things that are going to cause lawsuits. So that took some months to get from them, but I'm making all those changes as they have directed us to do so. And just some of the formatting and some of the things are different with the new laws and the things that cities are required to do. If they're not doing it, they're asleep at the wheel and they're going to get sued, and we're trying to prevent that. We don't want that litigation here in Murray City. So, okay, that's what I have for you tonight. Thank you for your efforts.
Before I ask for
Yes.
adjournment, I do just want to say how proud I am to be a part of this group.
Thanks, Mr.
Move to
Markham.
adjourn.
Adjourn.
Thank you.